Hello, this is Mrs. Brown from Research Triangle High School. The purpose of this presentation is to go over some possible organizational patterns that you can use when you're constructing an argument or a narrative of some type. The first type of organizational pattern is just known as narration or description. Now, this is particularly effective if you just want to tell a story of some kind. You're trying to make a point and you're going over what happened to you at some particular point in time or what happened to someone else. You're describing. So it creates a picture to sort of evoke the senses. It's usually told in kind of a chronological, what happened first, what happened next. And this would be example, a paper along the flavor of what I did on my summer vacation. When you're trying to describe something that had happened before, you're narrating, you're telling the story. Now, the second type of organizational pattern is known as illustration. This is when you're using examples in order to explain a more complex point. So the first thing you're doing is stating a general idea, belief, or concept, and then you're following it up with really specific reasons, examples, facts, and details to support your general idea. So let's say, for example, you're assigned to write a paper about the general causes of revolutions. What are the things and the factors that can lead some country or some group within a country to have a revolt against the current group that's in power? And so you'd be describing this by using various, you have this general idea about what causes revolutions, and you'd be following examples from specific countries and history and various ideas. Now remember, some of these patterns do overlap, so it is possible that some different papers could use a combination of effects. So the first thing we talk about is narration. This is illustration, is another type of pattern. Now, third type of organizational pattern is known as a definition. This is when you're trying to clarify something that may be a more abstract concept. So you're trying to establish the limits for what you mean about a particular thing that you're talking about. And this is to make an abstract concept more concrete, usually through specific examples. Let's say you had to write a paper about the meaning of loyalty. What does that mean in different situations? Is it different to be loyal to a friend? Is it different to be loyal to a company that you work for? Is it different to be loyal to your country? And is that concept in how that applies to different ways. So a definition paper is asking you to take something that's an abstract concept or idea and then use these kinds of illustrations and specific details in order to define that concept more specifically. Another organizational pattern you might need to use is something called a classification or division. This is when you either move upward from a specific example to some feature that things have in common, or let's say you're moving downward from some general concept to a system of subcategories within that concept. And let's suppose in this case you had to write a paper about types of mammals or the evolution of mammals. You could start at the general top about the general idea and work your way down, or you could start with specific examples and work your way up with what they all had in common. Now, cause and effect is one of the most common types of argumentative writing that you will be asked to do. This is when you're asked to show relationships between events and then the results of that relationships. So basically, you're first showing what created a specific situation and then what are the results of that particular situation. Let's say you were assigned to write a paper on the increased use of cell phones in social settings. So the first thing you would do is say, why are more people using their phones now when they're out with their friends or out to dinner or even on dates? And then you look at what are the results of those things. So why are people using their phones more? And you could list off all the reasons why. They have more available phones, more contact, more expectations, and then the results of this, both positive or negative results of staying in touch more often with electronics, even through a social setting. Now, compare and contrast is probably the second most common pattern like cause and effect. This is where you're taking two very different ideas and you're asked to show how are they both related, so how are they connected, how are they alike, and then also how are they different, on what points do they differ. Let's say you were asked to describe character foils in a novel. These are characters that have a connection or relationship to each other, but because they're both in the novel, they bring out or highlight different characteristics of each other. So comparing and contrasting, let's take back that revolutions topic. You could compare and contrast what was the American Revolution, what did that have in common with the French Revolution, for example. So there's some things that they both had that were alike. There's some things that they both had that were different. Now, process analysis is a type of organizational pattern that you'd most likely use in a scientific or mathematical or engineering setting. This is when you're describing an operation through a series of steps to get to a specific result. So this might be something where you're demonstrating, you're illustrating instructions. Let's say you were asked to write a paper to describe a specific science lab. You would use a process analysis. So what were the first steps and why were those important to be there? What were the results of that? What happened next? What happened next? So you're looking at the different steps in a very specific type of process, and that's known as a process analysis way of organizing your ideas in the paper. Another way to think about how you can organize your ideas as you go to form your arguments is thinking about order of importance. And this can either be ascending or descending. That is, going from the most thing that happened first to the thing that happened last, or the other way around, telling what happened last and then working your way up to the thing that happened first. And these could be climactic, so you're building from your least important idea up to your key point, or vice versa. You could start with your biggest idea and then work your way down to little specifics there. Or it could even be a spatial kind of organization. If you're describing a paper in some kind and you're trying to give that kind of demonstration, you might present ideas in order of their physical position. So how do you move in a particular situation from the top to the bottom, left to right, background to foreground example. So hopefully you've picked up a couple of different ways that you can think about taking what it is that you're trying to create as an argument and your various pieces of evidence and organize them in a way that creates the best effect to make sure that your argument stands. And that's the end.